Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who've kept us going for over 400 episodes.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogamespodcast. Dude of the week is Waffle House Rugal.
Thank you, Waffle House Rugal. Thank you for that name. What a great name.
Yeah, brand new dude. Excellent name.
I can just imagine Rugal at a Waffle House at 3 a.m. eating some like waffles.
Yeah,
with his pet panther sitting across from him.
If you're not from the Midwest, Waffle House is essentially sort of what Denny's is to California, to like West. I'm sure Denny's is everywhere, but like Denny's is, you go there at 1 a.m. after you went and saw a movie or something. Waffle House.
No, you want to make it relevant for West Coasters. Norms.
No, Norms is it's a good one, but the idea is you really only, it's 24 hours, but you only go there between midnight and 4 a.m. That's the only time it's good. Any other time, it's mostly just sad. It's sad to be there.
Or weird, like ominously quiet, like just what?
All you have to do, pick any social media and just type in Waffle House search, and you're going to see just the worst side of humanity constantly, unless it's like 4 a.m. So enjoy that. But we do have a sponsor to thank, and of course we're talking about Manscaped, and I have my absolute favorite product from them right here, the Beard Hedger Pro. But it's not the only product I like. And I recently did a backpacking trip for my birthday, and I was gonna take crop preserver with me because ball deodorant, gonna make sure I don't smell like swamp ass when I get to my destination. It turns out all deodorants attract bears. Big signs where we're going. We're like, do not wear deodorant. Do not pack deodorant. Like, don't wear deodorant. It attracts bears. So I didn't bring it in. By the time we get to the trip, like 4 days later or whatever, it's all bad. I just haven't showered in 4 days. But I had in my glove compartment my last crop mop. And so I used that. So the whole drive home, I smelled wonderful. Elise stank. Just awful. I made fun of her terribly. When you're married, you get to make fun of a person. She was fine, but I had one crop mop and it saved me. And I love the crop preserver, but crop mops might be more useful. You can have it just sitting in your glove compartment. You can have it in your backpack. I wouldn't take it backpacking because I don't know how well that scent.
Your backpack to the gym would be a great place for your crop mop.
Well, that's where I used them all originally. So Manscaped saved my day again on my birthday. But if you're interested in checking out any of their products, like the Beard Hedger Pro, which we have all the time talked about how we love this, or the crop mop or the crop preserver, please head over to manscaped.com. Use our code YoVG, all caps, for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. That's code YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. Your balls will thank you. So nothing happened this week. No reason why we held off till Wednesday.
Very quiet week. Nothing was going down. Nothing scandalous.
Phil Spencer's having an interesting week, I imagine. I do think thing should,
but I don't think it's as interesting as people think it is.
No, I honestly, actually, it's all old news. He even said it. He's like, it's nothing in here is like, I don't know, devastating. So, of course, we're talking about background information for everyone who's not on Twitter brain or on Twitter and doesn't have Twitter rot. There was the big leaks. It's now made its way into the like IGN.
So in the FTC court filings, the Activision, filings for, it's funny because I literally say it's for the Microsoft versus Sony. It's not. It's Microsoft appealing to let the Activision Blizzard court case go through, but it's really Sony the one who's stonewalling this.
Sony is the one that was lobbying the FTC to stop it.
Anyways, someone at Microsoft, as it was determined, screwed up, and when they uploaded the files to the FTC, they accidentally uploaded Microsoft's 10-year plan. So the entirety of the 10 years, but now this is starting in 2020. This is the 2020 to 2023, or I'm sorry, 2030. Sorry,
Yeah.
not even, that's a 3-year plan. 2030. This is all the way to 2030. Now we're in 2023, so it's like 7 years out from now, right?
And has probably drastically changed, but
of course, which I think a lot of people are not going to remember, because these dates are going to hit and they're going to be like, what the hell? They said this was supposed to be. This was in the leaked document. It's like, yeah, because everything's set in stone. And no, let me break down a little bit, because holy God, Twitter yesterday was so incredible to read people's hot takes that knew how the industry actually worked, and all the other content creators and enthusiasts who have no idea how the game industry works or how they think.
right.
And for one thing, let's get this out of the way. Most companies have 10-year plans, 5 to 10-year plans. Most of them do. Maybe they sometimes refresh every 5 years or every year, whatever.
Or
they actually
every time an executive takes over, they release their 10-year plan.
Yeah, every time there's another big change in leadership. There is plans set in motion for 10 years. So they kind of know exactly what they want to do for a decade. That's how they operate. That is standard.
Right.
So when you sit there like, oh, you tell me they plan to have this version of this console and they were going to play it. Yes, they actually did. They actually knew exactly what they wanted to do, a decade ago. Like, and not only was it Microsoft's hardware 10-year plan, it was Bethesda's 10-year plan. So now we know about games that haven't been announced and when they were projected to come out as of 2020. So,
and there's a couple interesting things in
and
there.
there is some interesting. So one interesting thing was there's going to be a Series X version that has no disk drive. So it's like the Series S, but without a disk drive. I don't know. Some people were really making a big deal about this. I don't know why. It's like, if you don't want to buy a hard drive only version of the Series X, then don't. Like, the Series X exists right now. It's plenty easy to find if you want a disc version. So, and somebody like, well, this is just pushing us further and further narrative of like never owning your games. I'm like, that's what everyone wants, buddy. Right. Like, everyone wants it. The thing is like, one sort of like weird blowback, and this comes from like there's so much stupid ass console warring coming out of this. My God, if you're biased towards one console or the other, grow up. Like, just grow up. But
it mattered a lot more even 10 years ago.
Yeah, well,
but I would argue it hasn't mattered for,
because this 10-year plan is out in the open. People are like, look at all this evil scheming Microsoft's doing. And it's like, you are naive as a child if you think Sony and Microsoft don't have 10-year machinations with things that aren't exactly pro-consumer. Like, right. They're all planning things that you would probably consider anti-consumer or moving further and further into the realm of never actually owning a physical game. They all want this. Like,
and it's been going this way for at least 15 years.
Yes, and people will sit there like, Nintendo doesn't do this. Excuse me. In 2006, Nintendo offered the virtual console on the Wii. Nintendo no longer offers you the ability to buy NES, Super NES, or N64 or Game Boy games on their product. They allow you to subscribe to a service that lets you play those games online, and the minute you unsubscribe from that service, you no longer have access to their games. Nintendo is doing the exact same thing. Sony is doing the exact same thing with the PlayStation Plus and Premium and Extra. Like, there is no good guy in corporations. There are no friendly corporations. Like, I'm like, I'm putting that stand out right now, where it's like, I don't want to necessarily be like, oh, I'm standing up for Microsoft. I'm just going to sit there and say, like, there is no good guy here. just because you saw someone with their pants down, for their 10-year plan does not mean the other two jerk offs are not
On
doing
your
or
team.
planning similar things.
I guess my problem is like nothing in the leaks that I read, and I read the actual emails, not people's tweets about the emails, and I read the like deck slides and stuff.
Mhm.
Nothing in it is like people are acting like there's some evil plan they stumbled upon here. And it's like this is all standard corp anybody, and I know for most of our listeners, they also work in a corporate environment or like at least in an environment where they see decks and corporate emails pretty
Yeah.
regularly. Like none of this is all corpo bullshit. Like none of this is outright scheming. Like
This is just general business.
right, and there's the big one, the big email where everyone's all like, "Look, he was scheming to buy Nintendo." One, they tried to buy Nintendo once already, but two, in his actual email about it, it's so clear that Phil's basically doing the corporate version of a shoot down of a bad idea or an idea that isn't going to go anywhere by doing that idea is really really good, but here's the reasons why it's not going to work, and we both came to that conclusion together. We're both
Right,
all on the same
there
team.
was
It's that, like
and,
kumbaya.
and I saw people last night were trying to tie this to a conspiracy of Phil was talking specifically to a shareholder, for who was buying shares into
Right.
Nintendo, who was going to try like using this as a way to get the Nintendo to like infiltrate them like a psyop or something.
Yeah, so
No.
that is actually probably maybe one of the best windows into the problem with essentially the stock market as it exists today. What he said in the 2 lines that he talks about that is basically the biggest problem with I mean, at the very least, Western investment strategy. Why won't they sell to you? Oh, well, because they're sitting on a big pile of cash and they're doing fine. Oh, but that'll change when this Western investment corporation or Western investor group gets involved because they'll force them to want to expand and go for more and more money. And then when we come into an offer to buy them for a good price, that investor owns enough stock to swing it our way because they'll be obligated to sell for the price we're going to offer them. Like right now, the investors all don't want that. They're all like, Nintendo's been doing great for over 100 years. That's what we want. But this investment group, which he names and I can't remember, is going to come in there and they'll be way more open to us buying Nintendo because they don't care about Nintendo. They care about printing money. That is like that's the most vile thing in the entire report, and it has nothing to do with Microsoft or Phil Spencer. It has everything to do with just common investment practices.
Right.
Like that's how they all work.
the line that it got a lot of people in a tizzy, and I'm not gonna name. I mean, I did reply. I replied to at least one Twitter, and I had to mute it because it was like these people just started having novels of conversation on Twitter, and it was just screwing up my timeline. Wasn't even that bad. It was just sort of like people just discussing back and forth about it, where the line, Phil says their future exists off of hardware, but they just don't see it. And people are like, oh, they're insulting. It's insulting and underhanding Nintendo, and not really, because on the one hand, Nintendo could easily have a bright future without hardware because it would save them billions of dollars in R&D costs. And here's the other thing that I think a lot of like console warring biased fanboys don't want to hear is that Microsoft's deep pockets would give Nintendo much better hardware. Like, yeah, the Switch is selling, but people think like, people think in terms of sports teams. They think in the terms of like, yeah, Microsoft's not selling anywhere near as well as Nintendo. So that's really insulting for them to say for Phil to say such a thing when they've sold 120 million Switches and they've only sold 40 million Xboxes. Like this is a basketball game or a football game, and it's about like, this guy is scoring more points. So there, it's like, let to get to broader reality, Earth, Microsoft's pockets and ability as they have in R&D will vastly outperform Nintendo's. They're willing to spend way more money on hardware for a game console, whatever type it is, hybrid, mobile, whatever, than Nintendo will be.
And hardware
Like,
is a losing.
right, and Nintendo is smart. They've made a huge success off of a piece of crap hardware. But like, yeah, it is a piece of junk. It's garbage. It was mid-level when it came out, and it is absolute garbage nowadays. Great games come out on it, because I'm not talking about games. I'm talking specifically about hardware specs here.
This is also this goes back to that investment group buying up more shares of Nintendo. Nintendo has a philosophy of wanting to control their own ecosystem. So they will always produce their own hardware until the majority of their investors put pressure on them to make greater and greater profits. And hardware is a losing prospect every single time. If you don't have deep pockets, you lose money on hardware, period. Although now I would say they're probably making money on Switch just because of how old the technology is. But, hardware's a losing prospect. Basically, once that investment group has enough shares or enough sway, they'll basically go like, oh, but you could maximize and open up your software, which is your brand, to the entire world by having PC versions or by being on every Microsoft
and to be fair,
like
Nintendo has
kind of
almost not always, but almost always sold their hardware for profit, at a profit, small profit. Wii U was not, and it bit them in the ass real hard.
I do think that's interesting because Nintendo is, I would say, maybe of all the corporations in existence today, but definitely of the big three in gaming, they are the most sustainably minded.
Yeah.
Like they are
smart.
very conservative in how they go about
Here's the thing. They are smart. But
anybody who argues different apparently is like,
well, Nintendo is smart, but also what Phil's saying here really isn't that big of a deal, and it's not an insult and it's not an undermining. Microsoft and Nintendo are in constant communication all the time.
Right.
This is like, a lot of people are like, oh man, this is going to make Phil's trip to Tokyo Game Show real awkward. No, it's fucking not.
I'm not really sure why, but it has to be influencers or something that really don't know anything, and they think this is like, I don't know, the dirt.
Right. Like, well, his dirty secret exposed. No. And like I said, everyone who had industry experience, all were saying the same thing we're saying right now, which was like, this was nothing. Like these statements don't really mean much. This is kind of general corpo speak.
Right. And the thing is there is interesting stuff in the leaks. But there's nothing scandalous in this leak.
No.
It's not great that it's out there because it lets their competitors kind of know where they're trying to head.
Yeah.
But it's also not, this is by no means a mortal blow or anything. Like, maybe the two things that were big were the whole, if Game Pass isn't making a profit by 2027, Microsoft might leave gaming. Okay. Maybe.
Yeah, well, that and he had some really lofty ambitions for 100 million subscribers to Game Pass.
Right, but
which was like, oof, that's hard, because they're only at like 25.
Right, they always do that though. They always set some like big rocket goal, that they say in meetings that they give the board of directors, but that's always tempered by a realistic number too. But your deck is always going to have the lofty goal. Like that's how all these guys in that sector, that's how they are. That, like, you do the no half measures deck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't say here's a realistic number. Give me the number. What's the number that's going to get everybody hard under the table? That's the number they put on there. And I wish I wish that wasn't the case. I wish Microsoft behaved a little bit more like Nintendo, say, where it's a little bit more conservative, or maybe any of the Western companies behaved a little bit more sustainably, I guess.
Mhm.
But part of the reason why Microsoft is as dominant as it is, just generally and globally, is for the like they set big numbers and big goals, and then they put everything they have into getting it. Whether it wins or not, that is going to cause waves. Period. And like, could Microsoft buy Nintendo? Yeah, if Nintendo wanted to sell, Microsoft could buy them. Sony could not buy Nintendo if Nintendo wanted to sell. They
Right.
just don't have the money like Microsoft has money. Um, would I want that, by the way? No, I would not.
No, I
I
wouldn't want it, but like Phil works for Microsoft and he works high up.
Right. He doesn't
Him
work for
him bel
gamers.
him believing that his company with the vast pockets they have, him believing they would be a good fit for Nintendo is not insulting or brash or whatever. It's believing in your effing product.
Right.
Like, it would be weird if in an email it says like, "Yeah, Nintendo's really kicking our ass. We suck so much. I can't sell nothing. They're the greatest thing ever. I wish I was them." It's like, no, the man believes in what he's doing and trying to sell, and of course he thinks that his company is on the right track because that's what his job is.
Right. You're
He,
never going to find an executive who isn't like that, by the way.
yeah, and it's like, you want to talk about other failures out there and stuff. It's like, do you think Jim Ryan and his wrinkled ass over at Sony is sitting there thinking, "Wow, we're really not selling a lot of PSVR 2s. We're really screwing the pooch on this." Or, is he sitting there thinking like, "Wow, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of consumer interest in my Wii U screen for the PlayStation 5." Like, do you think? No, he's sitting there, we're going to offer. He's sitting there talking how great it is. We're going to offer
Hmm.
you all these experiences. You can play, through Wi-Fi. You can remotely play your PS5. We're offering you all this new stuff. Like, do you sit there and thinks like he realizes like nobody gives a crap about this thing? Like, no, it's like they
No.
obviously, when they get to this point, they obviously believe in their product. They think everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. Like, if you think you're making the wrong decisions, if you think your console sucks, if you think you have no future, why would you even still be there?
Right. You're not going to stay in business. The other interesting thing that I thought from that whole, acquisition section of the leak is people were really sort of like shocked that Valve would be interested in selling to Microsoft or that Microsoft would be interested in buying from Valve. Valve has the best online store system with a loyal customer base on PC
Yeah,
out of any of the
yeah.
storefronts. Why would Microsoft not be interested?
Honestly, it's kind of one of this weird thing where it's like, who wouldn't, want to buy, some of,
Steam, yeah.
Steam or Nintendo, for that matter, or some of these other big names that got name dropped or whatever. It's like, who wouldn't want to buy this? Like, of course they do. Doesn't mean they will. Doesn't mean like it's actually going to happen, or like there's an actual scheme in development to make this happen.
Although
Um,
oddly enough, the only other group that would have been able to compete with Microsoft to buy a Nintendo or a Valve was Embracer Group, and they had more. They just did layoffs at Crystal Dynamics, so they're not doing. Microsoft might be the
yeah,
only company able
yeah.
to.
Well, Embracer's kind of imploding in front of our eyes. I think we kind of, and we know
Yeah,
we've already kind of talked about that. Which that's what happens when like you go on this crazy buying spree with no actual product releases.
right.
It's the biggest example of biting off more than anyone they can chew. Period.
Well, I do think Embracer Group is a perfect example of why Microsoft should be very low and slow about who they buy
Yeah.
and what. And that again, from these leaks, you can see at least the Bethesda release schedule um sort of ramps up. There's definitely been a desert, but then you're gonna have like your Fallout 3 remake that they're talking about. Is it a remake or just a port?
Well,
I
let
thought
me
it was a
see. I'm looking at it right now, and Starfield and Redfall both totally missed their years they were supposed to come out. I
right, but
guess
this deck is from before COVID.
yes. I
That's
don't
another
know.
thing everybody's leaving
Yeah,
out.
so there's some weird thing. I don't know what a Project Hibiki even is. I think that's maybe Hi-Fi Rush. Pretty sure it is. Anyways, so they have Indiana Jones game next year, Oblivion remaster,
Right.
Elder Scrolls Online expansion, of course, and Starfield DLC, and then free to play mobile 3 plan titles, and then the year after that, Doom Year Zero and DLC,
Right.
Project Kestrel. I don't know what that is. I'm sure someone does. Another Elder Scrolls Online expansion, and whatever Project Platinum is. I don't know what I think Kestrel is known. I don't know what Project Platinum is. And then the year after that, so we're talking 26. At this point, Elder Scrolls 6, Project Kestrel expansion, licensed IP game, Fallout 3 remaster, Elder Scrolls Online
Remaster.
expansion, Ghostwire Tokyo sequel, Dishonored 3, and then Doom Year Zero DLC. More Doom Year Zero DLC.
That's a pretty robust schedule for just Bethesda. And everyone's like, oh, there's no mention of Halo. It means Halo's dead. And it's like, but this is only Bethesda games, guys.
Yeah, this was
everything that you're looking at is Bethesda specific. Like, why freak out? Like, there's going to be Halo is going to be a cornerstone of Microsoft's brand forever, for better or worse. There's going to be plenty of it.
Yeah, and well, well, I'll say this, Andrew. If the next Halo Omega tanks, maybe not.
I think there'll be a brief pause and then it'll come back.
I think the IP can only spiral so far before they just stop trying. But I don't know that it's not necessarily sold poorly, right, or done poorly for them. I don't think people are not happy with Infinite in the way it's gone, but that doesn't necessarily mean Infinite didn't make them money. You know,
I think the biggest problem with Halo right now is that there's maybe Master Chief fatigue. My favorite Halo game, maybe not favorite, but one of my top Halo games was ODST, where it was like it was Halo, it was still Halo, but it was a variation of that.
Yeah.
Reach also a good example. Like, people might just be fatigued with that main through line. You know, it's a whole galactic world war, or it's a whole galactic war. It's like focusing only on a single storyline of World War II. And then after World War II ends, you continue on with that guy for like skirmishes that are happening after. It's like, no, just switch theaters, man. Like, there's so much you can do in Halo. What are you doing? I also think that a big thing that's hurting Halo right now is Halo doesn't know how to evolve its multiplayer at all. It went from being the best arcade shooter experience to trying to like keep that experience while go after the COD people, and I think that they're just two different desires.
I think multiplayer itself is
burning out. Yeah.
Well, it's running into a conundrum because there's too much. There's too much multiplayer. The Evil Dead game basically just announced that they're basically ceasing production on the game.
Right.
I mean, I know it just launched, but it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is probably next. I'm not saying I hope for that. I'm just kind of like, man, it just kind of like feels like we're getting into this point where it's like, well, and the next one, and
I mean, especially with asymmetric multiplayer, there was a real like boom of those. Yeah. And I feel like it was a niche crowd that they play one. They don't hop around. It's the same with big shooters and stuff. It's what's going on with Battle Royale. Battle Royale was a great idea that exploded, and like everybody wanted to have a Battle Royale, and now it's like, you're burned out. You're not going to jump month to month to a different game and come back. I honestly think that the reason why you're getting multiplayer fatigue or why you're getting multiplayer burnout is what it seems like to me. Generally, multiplayer is burning out. There's too much going on. I think it comes down to two things. One, everybody's working. Everybody that can afford to buy games on the schedule that they're being released are all people who are working, and we're all working more hours now than we have ever before. So you come home, do you want to grind to get good at a multiplayer game like you did when you were in high school or college?
Mhm.
Because in high school and college, you have the hours to get good, which means you can ride that line between being really good at a game and hating it. Because in order to be really good at a game, you have to love it enough to get really good at the game, and then you spend all of your time hating it and getting better out of spite.
Exactly. You have to love it enough to hate. And that's
Right.
professional level. That is
Right.
tournament level gameplay. It's like
And the
you-
problem with YouTube is all multiplayer is professional level gameplay now. It's you look for the tips and the tricks of the pros to play it like the pros do. And the pros play games in just the least fun way possible.
yeah.
And
Play to
so
win.
all multiplayer games are now exhausting. So you come home from your exhausting job doing whatever you're doing. You sit down and you decide to be angry for an hour before you're exhausted of the game. And so you watch YouTube videos about how to be better at that game. It's just YouTube videos going like, well, if you stand right here and shoot with this sniper rifle between the containers right at the beginning, you'll kill 2 people. And you just do that every time you die, and you'll have a positive KD ratio. Everybody will hate you, and you will be actively ruining the experience of the game, but you'll win. And that's every shooter now, period.
Yep.
I do think that there's like a burnout of multiplayer, and so single player is starting to have a resurgence. But you can't milk single player quite the same way you can milk multiplayer with microtransactions.
Yeah,
and-
like single player. If how does it burn out? It just gets completely. Nobody knows about it. Like it just
right.
ceases to exist in most people's minds.
I honestly think that this leak is mostly a Nothingburger, but it has started a conversation on like people are wondering like, oh well, Sony doesn't have a 10-year plan, right? And it's like, absolutely, Sony has a 10-year plan. It's just that it's probably nonsensical. Um, you know, everything that Microsoft laid out here, none of it is surprising, or at least none of it should be surprising, right? They're going to have a hardware refresh. Sony's going to have a hardware refresh too.
Oh,
For sure.
absolutely.
Sony just seems like it does a lot of things reactive. Like it looked like in the past, Microsoft was constantly reacting to whatever Sony did or whatever Nintendo did. But with this leak, you can now see that, oh, maybe Microsoft, maybe the reason why they looked inept for the last generation is actually because they've been sticking to their game plan no matter what happens with the other guys. And the other guys are much more reactive. That can be good and bad. I'm not steeped enough in executive level decision making. Like I don't, I've never been an executive. I can't make that. Like I can't explain that decision making. But for a company the size of Microsoft, I bet you have to stick pretty close to your plan to the board of directors, because the board of directors doesn't know anything about gaming. They know that Phil Spencer's their guy in gaming, and here's his 10-year plan. And so these are the things where I can expect, hopefully, boosts to my earnings. Your refreshes, your controller, your new Elite controller, or they're going to have like a
I was just about to bring that
midline-
up. Yeah, the Sebel, the Sebel, whatever.
Sebel. They're going to have a midline between Elite, better than a regular controller, but not as good as an Elite controller.
Yeah. So it's gonna have an accelerometer in there, like I guess at long last. Like they'll have that junk.
Right, that thing nobody really wants.
Finally going to rechargeable, swappable battery. Rechargeable but swappable. Interesting. Quieter buttons and thumbsticks. They're actually going for quieter buttons. The controller looks kind of funny. It almost looks like it's got pants on.
Well, the original control. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not a quiet button push, but it also doesn't bother me.
Right. It was never like.
Yeah. I mean, you can hear it, but it's not. It just seems like a weird thing to go for.
I don't know. It's like we need to have some. It's like we need to have an improvement in some way. We have to rationalize like
This is why it's a
something.
$300 controller.
Ah, I hate. I mean, which most of that stuff I just generally hate.
I thought about getting an Elite controller when I was playing shooters a lot.
It is good.
It's really good, and you know, in a multiplayer world where you're playing professionally, basically as a pastime, yeah, you know, a lot of people. If you play a lot of shooters, you probably already know this, but like a lot of people go like, "Oh, I don't know how you do the slide canceling and the dolphin diving and the, you know, how do you do drop shotting and all this?" Well, you either are playing with a keyboard mouse where you have 20 buttons you can, you know, set, or macros you can set, or you play with a, you know, Elite controller that has paddles and other stuff, so that, you know, your duck is a paddle button, so when you're pulling the trigger and using the sticks, you can still drop using
Yeah.
your inside buttons. So an Elite controller is great for stuff like that. You just have to have a couple $100 that you want to put into being able to do it, you know. Or you can set, if you're playing on PC, you can set macros so that when you hold down the duck button, you also drop. I don't, you know, or you tap the duck button to drop, stuff like that. So Elite controller, cool. I don't know about a middle range. You know, I don't know who that's for really. It just seems like if you're going to have a better controller that's not the Elite controller, just make that the standard controller.
Yeah, I mean, Sebel's going to be what, $70 according to this leak list.
So it's going to cost the exact same amount as the standard PS5 controller.
Yeah, I don't know. The one thing I actually don't. The one thing I really don't get from them is like, why is the hard drive only the Brooklyn? Why is the Series X Brooklyn? Why is that still $500? Like, shouldn't it be 400? Because I mean, they have a replacement for the Series S, the Elliewood. It's just a bigger hard drive in there, and it's still going to be $300. They're just going to like replace it with a bigger hard drive, I think. But I don't know.
Elwood, is it named after
Elwood?
Yeah, is it named after Elwood? Isn't that the Legally Blonde character?
I have no idea.
That's amazing. No, one thing, disk drives are dirt cheap. So disk drives are never the thing that's causing your system to be expensive or not expensive. I wonder if it's also a hardware refresh where they're going to use new chips or, you know, new hardware. Maybe. I don't know. I also have to imagine that it's just them trying to widen their margins so they make a profit.
Yeah, there was also some talk as well in the leak about whether or not the Microsoft was going to do a handheld.
Yeah, okay. I heard, or I saw people talking about it, but I didn't see.
I don't think they are, and I think a lot of people are kind of like the smarter people are kind of like, they're talking about stuff like the ROG Ally, right?
Right.
Because if you get a ROG Ally, you actually get like 3 months of Game Pass on it or something. There's like some deal because it's a Windows-based handheld, like you know, laptop gaming machine. That's probably what they're talking about.
Yeah, their own version. Yeah.
I really don't think there's anything in here about, you know, Xbox getting into the portable space really.
And if they did, like, what kind of portable really would beat, you know, what's going to compete with the Ally? What's going to compete with the Switch? What's going to compete with the Steam Deck? You know, or do you even try to compete with that? Do you make it like, I sort of think the first person who makes a handheld the size of like the DS Lite or whatever, or the 3DS, but is 5G enabled so that you can cloud game on it wherever.
Yeah.
Like that guy, you know, the top screen is the size of a cell phone, but has like the same resolution and stuff as a cell phone. And like not a lot of computing is happening on the handheld. It's just streaming over 5G. You know, like that might be where handhelds go. Because mobile gaming as an experience sort of sucks.
Well,
even
I think
mobile gaming sort of sucks.
Yeah, I think Steam Deck being successful and stuff like ROG Ally is really interesting because it kind of is showing that there is still a market for handheld. gaming.
Oh, I think there's absolutely a market for handhelds.
Which we all kind of assumed that was dead. Like it's just phones and then people who begrudgingly buy Nintendo products for Nintendo games. Honestly, here's the thing. I'm actually kind of glad that we are seeing mobile gaming is getting a resurgence in a way, because I think it's good for Nintendo. Someone needs to compete like seriously with Nintendo in the portable space.
Yeah, so that they'll do something. Nintendo is a very creative company. It's one of the reasons why Nintendo has the following that they have.
Yeah.
It's just like Iwata died, and in a way, their soul died. Like
Yeah.
they're just trying to coast now, and it is, maybe that speaks to why Iwata was so great. But
Well, I think the other thing too is that you have a bean counter running the company now.
yeah,
So and again, Iwata was around for the creation of the Switch before he died.
mhm,
We're really going to see with the next system and the library of the next system and the business practices in the next system. We're really going to see what's truly beyond anything Iwata even had a hand in or knew about. And I don't think it's necessarily rosy. Because again, a bean counter is running the company. People say, "Oh, he's done a great job. Nintendo's super successful under the new leadership." Sure, but he's also inheriting the interim president Kimishima, who was also an interim, where Miyamoto and a couple others, like just sort of stood in, before they found the temporary, and now they have their permanent. But it's like it's a bean counter. He's a bean counter. No matter how much you want to like sit there and think Nintendo can do no wrong, this is a man who knows nothing about game development,
right.
about programming, about coding, about crunching. Like,
And I mean, if he's a good manager, he doesn't necessarily need to know those things.
no, and that's the thing, is like it doesn't sound in any way, by any metric, it doesn't sound like he's running the company to the ground. It doesn't sound like he did anything crazy policy
Right.
wise, like, oh, I'm going to turn this place into a factory outputting money. He's not doing that. It doesn't sound like he's doing that. And the thing I would just be more concerned about is less about, is this guy going to turn into a tyrannical overlord? No, I don't think so, because I think all the people high up in Nintendo would definitely not want that. I think they're smart. Again, they're so conservative. They're going to get someone who thinks and operates like the way everyone has thought and operated for the last 40 years of that company, right?
Mhm.
What I would be a little concerned about, if there is a concern, is the creativity side of it. The things that, like, Iwata or a Gunpei Yokoi, guy who created the
Yeah.
Game Boy, like something they could really think of, oh, this creative endeavor, because sometimes they come up with things that really work. Like Iwata was all in on the Wii. His big thing was that, okay, we've tried running the Power Race, it's not working out. Let's pivot. Blue Ocean strategy, go to the Wii. Super smart. The DS turned out to be super smart. The Wii U, absolute disaster. Because that's the thing. That's the sort of scary thing about a creative type like Iwata, is that he wanted to do all this asymmetrical multiplayer, which you could say he was kind of ahead of his time on, but the optics and the functionality and how the Wii U operated were bad. He wanted to create a social media platform with the Miiverse, if you remember that.
Right. Yeah.
People told him it wouldn't work, and it didn't. But like, he really had this idea. He really wanted to try this social experiment for
Oddly
his
enough, though,
platform.
he really was ahead of his time. Like, if it was executed just a little bit better, or maybe it was executed a few years later, he might have been onto something.
Had Nintendo, if had Nintendo, like you said, maybe earlier before, had they had functioning internet, because I think the internet has always been Iwata's Achilles heel. He famously said our consumers don't want to play games online. Sure, like, again, he wasn't infallible. Okay, like, great man, but like, come on, like, he said stupid things sometimes.
I
But
sort of agree with him, though, that Nintendo's core audience isn't a terminally online audience in terms of like
only because they've
online
kind of
multiplayer.
conditioned them that way. But think of it
Fair.
this way. Think of it, if the Wii U tablet was just closer in design to the form and functionality of a Switch, right?
Oh yeah.
And it was portable.
Hmm.
And it had hardware guts inside it, right? Maybe Wii U just needed to come out later, right? And let's just say they had way more functioning internet on
Yeah.
the Wii U, where they literally could have something that synced easily with your phone, and the Miiverse was like TikTok, but with a drawing tablet application on top of videos, on top of messages and text. Now that would have been a little dicey because anything with social media is dicey with as far as like random boobs
Oh
and
yeah.
dicks showing up or whatever. But he could have really been onto something with with Flipnote Studio stuff or with whatever. If the Wii U tablet was thin enough, portable enough, and actually had hardware inside it to let you play your games on the go.
Well, it's an interesting thing that you bring up there, because a lot of people talking about what the next Nintendo hardware is, oh, they're going to abandon the Switch, or it's going to be a Switch 2 or something like that. And it's like, part of me is like, oh no, they'll just go back to that idea of what the Wii U was supposed to be originally. And it's like, oh, you own a bunch of Switches. Here's a box that is powerful and stuff, but you can use your Switch as a controller like a Wii U tablet, and anyone who brings their switch over can connect to yours. And yeah, all the computing for the game you're playing is actually happening. It can happen on your box, on your TV, or it can also happen on your Switch on the go.
And I think you might even see things that did exist functionality wise within their older systems that are on Switch will come back to Switch, or Switch 2, right?
That's sort of where I'm leaning to them going, because it's a way to continuously sell those older Switches. While, yeah, okay, they have a new box you can buy, and yes, it does have higher, more upgraded graphics.
Mhm.
But since the Switch won't be doing any of the computing for the new games you're buying for specifically that system, you could technically just use your Switch now as a Wii U tablet.
Yeah.
As a better Wii U tablet, basically, and still have those same ideas that you had, like, a Mario Party where everyone has their Switch to see, like, certainly you're playing Mario Party Poker, or whatever awful thing you want to come up with for Mario Party. But like, you'll have both screens to do something, and then you get a lot of the 3DS kind of, that double screen sort of play style that you got for DS for a long time. It does seem like an evolution that would happen post Iwata, because
Yeah.
you're right, they're going to be out of creative ideas necessarily, but someone could very easily be like, hey, why don't we now have the technology and the player base. 120 million people already own a Switch.
Mm-hmm.
So what if we just brought them back to the Wii U idea, and they'll be called geniuses?
Yeah, like you really touched on something that I think could really happen, where it's like, imagine like a Mario Party style game of some sort where only one person needs to own the new model Switch, right? But all these other 120 million Switch owners can log on, like Jackbox
Can
TV
connect.
style,
Yeah,
can
exactly.
connect. They don't even have to be in the same room. They could even do it on the internet or on Wi-Fi in some way, right? And they get, the person who's running the main game, maybe he's got a little bit of a graphical boost or whatever, but everyone else has got enough juice on whatever they're playing, computational power, to do stuff that's a little more than just splitting the screen image up.
Right. It could be a thing. I mean, I know it's out there, and I'm not trying to like predict
It
the future.
sounds
If I'm right, you come back to me.
It sounds like something Nintendo would do.
It
where
does, yeah.
the Switch starts becoming a Trojan horse for their next system, and they get use out of the old Switches, that in conjunction with the new one.
It's almost a dumb, easy sell to say, like, oh, you already own a Switch, then don't worry about buying the bundle that has a Switch and the new hardware. Just buy the box. And you can just connect it, and now you have a new experience. Is it as good? Is your
I don't know
Switch
if
as
they
good as a Switch 2?
I don't know if they do that, but it would be, to me, it would be such a smart idea if there was a special toaster for the
It's a
new
booster pack. That's all it is.
right, like for the Switch 2, where it's like, here's the deal: you don't want to buy a new system, we'll sell you a toaster that has the guts of a Switch 2 in the toaster. So like you just sync your account, sync all your games, keep them saved on your original hardware. And if you just buy this upgraded toaster, you can play Switch 2, games on the toaster at home.
Yeah, and the
But
toaster's still going to be $300.
but when you're on the go, you can only play original Switch games. Or you
Right.
could play cloud versions of them. But you generally speaking, you can only do that. Where it's like, Nintendo won't do it because Nintendo thinks everyone's a mobile gamer. Nintendo thinks the vast majority of people play their Switches portably, which I think it's a little over half play portably. I'm very much one of the mostly play at home kind of guys.
Mhm.
But to me, it's like, I think having like an interesting thing where it's like, okay, let's say like a new Switch is $400 because it's a portable system with big beefy guts, right? But then they sell a $300 or a 250, 280 toaster that has the guts of Switch 2, but it only lets you play Switch 2 games at home because the guts are in the toaster for the new one. And you're just using your Switch to basically link as storage, basically, for all your old games. All your old games, game saves, account info, whatever.
It'd be interesting. It'd be a weird turn.
It'd be a weird way to go. That's a little like way off topic, I guess, from sort of
From
like
the leak. Well, the reason I bring that up though, and I know it's off topic from the leak, and circle back and finish the episode on the leak. This handheld idea from Microsoft could very much be that. It could be Microsoft looking at that idea and just being like, "Yeah, we could do that." Oh, we could build a beefier Switch that allows asymmetric game. Like they could sit there and be like, "Oh, we could make a Wii U work." Like that's very much how Microsoft thinks.
Yeah.
But
The
it
thing
is.
is that I don't think Microsoft will do a handheld. I think they'll just keep doing deals with things like ROG Ally.
Oh yeah.
Because for them it's pretty great because it's like, okay, well, it's a way for people to entice on the go portable gamers to get Game Pass, which is all they really want right now at the end of the day. They don't have to do any R&D designing a new system. They don't have to do any of the laborious process of manufacturing and releasing, their own portable. It's just, hey, we're going to partner up, and if you can use Game Pass on your Ally, great. We get money. You have a bullet point to sell to people. Everybody wins.
It's also probably worth mentioning that like there's no clear language in the leak that I've seen so far that actually says handheld. It's just more talking. It seems like it's pointing towards a handheld strategy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, that doesn't necessarily mean building a new handheld. Like you said, that could just be how they're going to like integrate with the current
And
handhelds on
the one thing that we didn't talk about at all is that they do seem to be pinning a lot of, I don't know if we want to say money or interest. They are talking a lot about cloud gaming, expanding cloud gaming.
Yeah, well, the whole industry is obsessed with that idea right now.
Yeah, they are, and we don't, whatever. Like, I use it sparingly on Game Pass when I don't want to download a giant file for a game, and if I especially don't think I'll be playing it very long. Cloud gaming is an interesting side gimmick.
Until fiber internet is regular everywhere,
yeah,
it's not going to be a thing.
This feels like, okay, cloud gaming feels like Microsoft's weird obsession that doesn't fly worldwide, in the same way Nintendo operates on the assumption that what's good for Tokyo is good for the rest of the world. Sometimes that's true, and sometimes that's not. And you can really see when it's not, for the rest of the world.
All of tech right now, tech meaning like Silicon Valley, West Coast tech companies, all of them are obsessed with cloud gaming because they think it'll force an infrastructure. Like Google got obsessed with cloud gaming because they thought it would force an infrastructure change. Google's been trying to force an infrastructure change against old world lobbies pretty much since 2001, 2002, like since the day it was born.
Mhm.
And they lost in LA. That's why they didn't build that big office in LA, because AT&T technically owns all the infrastructure rights in Los Angeles County, because they installed the phone lines. And the 80-year-olds in government that don't understand that the internet doesn't actually exist in a real cloud don't understand that the internet is not like telephones. It's they haven't government
Well,
hasn't
it used a
separated the
phone
regulation.
line, so it has to be the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. They haven't they still use those regulations because they don't. It doesn't.
Hey,
It just
look, Andrew, it's a series of tubes.
it's a series of tubes. That's what it is. It's actually the way you get fast internet is you give the rats that carry the messages, you give them cocaine. And that way it gets to the people typing up. So when you type something into your messenger, your aim, it sends a rat from your home with the message on its back. And it's like a Pony Express of rats. That's why New York has such fast internet. It's just so many
There's
rats
so
looking
many
for
rats
work.
and so much cocaine.
But uh a closing thought on this leak, it's a nothing burger. I do think that one cool thing that it shows is that when Microsoft bought Bethesda, it didn't slow Bethesda down.
Yeah.
If anything, it sped Bethesda up. I do think that it's interesting that it really showed how much Microsoft considered buying WB.
Yeah,
Um,
which I was like, I knew it. I
mhm.
knew it. I had been feeling it in my bones. No one wanted to like believe it. No one wanted to like entertain the thought. And I'm like, I think WB wants to sell.
But the reason Microsoft didn't buy him is just as illuminating. They wouldn't have been able to
It's
own the IP.
exactly that's what I said. I was like, I was saying this like years ago. I was like, I think WB wants to sell, but it's not gonna but they're never gonna find anyone because what WB wants to do is sell its developers and keep the
It's
IP
IP, yeah.
and then charge the people who bought it the rights to use the IPs that they're selling kind of thing. And I'm like, and that's why it'll never go. It'll never work.
I do think an interesting idea is that if Microsoft tried to buy NetherRealm, just NetherRealm, Mortal Kombat, like piecemeal just bought that, I think there is like a really good chance of that being a good marriage, if that makes sense. Like
But
WB
WB
is
wouldn't let
what
Mortal Kombat go.
right. They wouldn't sell the IP. They would sell NetherRealms.
Yeah, they'd sell the studio, but they wouldn't sell the IP because
But is Mortal
MK is
Kombat good without Ed Boon? I think no.
yeah, well, I think the idea is just that like it's the most consistently good selling video game IP they have.
Hmm.
So they're not going to let the IP go. They'll let they don't care about the people who make it.
Yeah.
They're irrelevant to Warner Brothers. Like but they're dumb because who is going to buy that? Like it's laid out here in executive corpo speak right here where it's like, yeah, this is not really a good buy because we won't get their IP. So what's the point? Nothing.
Right. Right. Everything we ever make with them.
Because then it's like, well, then Microsoft doesn't value the developers either. I'm like, well, Microsoft could easily just open a studio and just poach all of them.
Poach them. And this is another thing that this leak confirms about the point of view of these companies. None of them want to create new IP. They want legacy IP that they can milk. They don't want to go about the creative process because executives just generally do not understand creative process at all, because you can't quantify creativity. You
Yeah.
can't it's
They're
I have
they're trying to bring mathematics into an art field.
I worked for a brilliant guy who is very creative, but he couldn't, when he was managing, he couldn't turn off that like quantitative desire that he had to know. So it's like I'm working as a writer, and if he couldn't hear me typing, he was all like, "You're not working." And it's like, well, it's not how writing works. Like no one's typing for 8 hours a day Like, you don't just sit there and type. Like, there's a lot of thought. You go for like walks and stuff. You know what I mean? Um, you, it's a really difficult thing to quantify. You can't quantify creativity. It's sort of like how if Disney only paid you by every line you drew, like Disney never would have had an animation department. But I think that's probably the biggest revelation.
Yeah, well, here's
of
the
the
other thing
leak.
too about Legacy. Everyone wants to buy, everyone wants to own Legacy. Nobody wants to create a new Legacy.
Yeah. I think
They want IPs, they want IPs, they want IPs, they want all this like Legacy stuff. How about, but they don't want to build a new one.
Yeah.
Because building is risky. What if it doesn't take off? What if it doesn't work? What if we lose money on the first one?
And we no longer build things. And that's sort of the sad.
No, we just absorb. We absorb already existing things rather than create new.
I don't love it, but it is true. On that depressing note, is there any final things from the leak that you?
Here's the thing, and we've said it before, but we haven't said it in this episode, and it has to be said. And here's the thing, I just want to get this is going out to everyone who hasn't ever read like or been around these high level executive types. These mergers and acquisitions, M&As, these buyout offers, these deals, they are floated all the time. They are constantly, Sony and Microsoft and probably Nintendo, they are literally saying, hey, you want to get bought Square? Hey, Sony be like, hey, Capcom, you want to buy? Like, they are floating ideas to each other. They usually never go anywhere. They usually don't. That doesn't mean they're not floating the ideas. They are floating the ideas. Offers are given, ideas are floated, things are just sort of thrown out there behind closed doors all the time.
Constantly, yeah.
Constantly. This leak is only just showing you what goes on normally all the time. This is crazy. This leak is not normal, but what's in this leak is pretty standard. It's very you got a very normal look into the very normal all the time happenings of corporations that they do behind closed doors, and the reason is exactly why you saw exactly why they're always behind closed doors, because of how people treat this information.
Mm-hmm.
How people have blown up and reacted to this is exactly why this stuff doesn't get known until it's a done deal.
And if you're wondering why Phil Spencer isn't running around scrambling, is none of this reflects poorly on him.
No. And this is 3 years ago, and I guarantee you he's probably been in daily communication, weekly communication with all these companies, including Nintendo, all the time. So this leak, there was I guarantee you Phil might have even already at some point in the last 3 years, he might have literally told Nintendo, "Hey, we'd buy you. Just saying, you want to get bought? We bought." Times. And Nintendo probably went no. And then this leak comes out and like, oh, they know that you asked to buy. So they're like, yeah, I know. Remember, I asked you this last week.
All right. On that note, we have producers to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Waffle House Rugal. Thank you, Waffle House Rugal. Still a great name. And our producers for this episode are Mutton Chops Johnson, The Pink Hammer, The Schmidt One, Scrunami, Koroi 35, Hyper Viper 89, Ziggy Z, and Online Persona. Thank you, dudes. And we will catch you next time.
Later, dudes.